congratulations for coming out from 2 points of view. Congratulations, first of all, for braving the cold, and congratulations for having the courage to turn up at a seminar like this, because so often, you know, and maybe why there's a few vacant seats around the room is the fact that people think, oh, like if people see me turning up, they'll think I've got a problem in this area, and so for that reason people sort of tend to stay away, and notoriously people who do have a problem tend to stay away because of the possibility of being labelled or whatever, or being recognised. So congratulations. The internet, of course, is a very pervasive and invasive thing. You know, it's got its many upsides, of course, and isn't it always the way, like where it is that the Lord gives a good gift, Satan has a way of being able to pour his foulness and poison into that good gift. We look at so many things: alcohol, drugs, in terms of the good thing for medicine, etc., but in turn being used for evil. Even nuclear power, it can be a wonderful gift, but on the other hand, it can blow societies apart. And the internet is no different. It's got many, many benefits, although sometimes you wonder when you get caught with a computer and it's, you know, playing up and you can't do what you're supposed to do and whatever. But you know, it's to one degree or another made our lives a whole lot easier, a whole lot more complicated in other ways. But the internet also is home to a very pervasive thing in terms of the pornography industry. Back in 2006, it's the last statistics that I have, but there's something like 20.5 billion pornographic emails being sent out weekly, and what it meant was that back in 2006, what it meant was that for every internet user per capita, there was 4.5 pornographic emails being sent across the world, and that was 2006. It's increased a whole lot more now. So it's not surprising that we might go to the internet and be doing something completely innocent, but pop-up comes, or we open an email or whatever, and there is pornographic images that are there that begin to make their way into our lives. Matter of fact, I want to just look at the ways in which that may happen, and have a little diagram here of the heart, and right there's a fish hook, and what so often happens is that an image actually hooks itself into the human heart. Now, going back to kids who might be using the internet, there's just going to be a curiosity about sexuality. It's all talked about at school and whatever, and an image is somehow released onto the screen, and the bottom line there, curiosity, and the kids can go, whoa, this is what the other kids were talking about. Let me have a look at this, and so they can look. But on the other hand, in terms of adults, That's not. I just made this afternoon, and it's not exactly coming out best on the. I haven't learned how to do PowerPoint yet. I've got to do this. But the other thing in our hearts is lust, loneliness, pain, longing. And what happens is that these images, I mean, sexuality is a very, very powerful thing. It's a wonderful, again, beautiful gift from God. Just, we are designed to, and given this beautiful gift of sexuality, which is the flip side of spirituality. And so we are designed to be attracted to the human body, but of course God has given parameters in which they can be used, and how we respond to our attractions, how we guide and boundary our attractions. So the heart has got a natural attraction to the human body. There is certainly curiosity, there can be lust, there can be loneliness, pain, and what happens is that we see an image, and it hooks into something in the heart. I remember from John, I recall from John, Jesus, when he was going to the cross, and he said, Satan has nothing in me. In other words, Satan has, there's no sin within me that Satan can hook. But so often in the redeemed heart, there is still sin and the old person that we are putting to death. As we live in the new creation, the new creature, but the old is being put to death. And so often there's stuff in there that can still be hooked, as it were. And so we tend to be triggered and go into what we call mental preoccupation. We think, wow, that was interesting. What can happen is we think we're hooked, we can close it down very quickly. Like, I'm not going to look at that. That's not what I wanted to do. But then we come back and go, just maybe on a lonely day, mainly at a point when we're feeling a longing or some pain or escape, to think, that image, I'll just go back and have a quick look at that image. I'm not going to dwell on it, I'll just have a look. And that's how it is that we so easily can be. I've actually got the wrong one up. I just want to change, sorry. Come to here. There we go. Same thing. The lust, the loneliness. We see the image and we experience pleasure. We can close it down very quickly, but sometime later we go back and have another look, and we get into another whole cycle here. We recall what we saw. There's a fascination. We explore what it was that we saw. We can then close it down again. I'm going to ignore that. I'm not going to look at that. That's not what I should be looking at. But the same things can come back at some other time. And so we recall again, and then we can go back with some extended looks, reinforced, and that M letter there stands for masturbation. Inevitably people end up masturbating, especially men, I guess, but also women, to pornography. And what happens when there's pornography, when there's the image and masturbation takes place? There are powerful associations that are actually formed in the brain. And we're forming neural pathways all the time, new neural pathways all the time. But where there's that release of orgasm, there's an orgasm, there's the bonding chemical, which is called oxytocin. And the Lord has built that into our body, clearly because of the fact that when we're meant to have orgasm in marital love, and the whole purpose of oxytocin is to bond husband and wife together. So that's just one of the chemicals that's released at orgasm. But when we are having orgasm or masturbating to something that is, we're not with our husband or wife, then we actually are bonding to the image, or even bonding to the computer and the whole activity that's taking place. So there's a kind of a cycle, a compulsive cycle that develops here. So I've got here bonding and neural association. We form a powerful neural association in the brain. And that is something that's being reinforced. And so we're going to find that we will go back to it time and time again. And then it's what we call boundary creep, because the other chemical that is released in looking at pornography is adrenaline. From the point of view that we are doing something that we shouldn't be doing. We know that we shouldn't be doing this. There's just something wrong. Even non-Christians know that there's just something not quite right about it. Even though the world on the surface says, hey, porn's natural, everybody does it. Because of the fact that we're made in the image of God, and because of the fact that His eternal nature and divine power is seen in what it is that He has created, and He's created the gift of sexuality, His divine power, eternal nature is actually seen in sexuality. Deep down, people know that somehow this is not what sexuality was made for. Even if it's subconscious, there is that knowledge. And so, when they are contravening, when we contravene God's law, we recognise, wow, something is happening here that I shouldn't be doing. And so there's adrenaline that is released because there's a certain excitement to the thing. And that adrenaline, brings further excitement. Now, what happens is that when you repeat the activity, same old becomes a bit boring. So you've got to look to find something just a bit more exciting, something that will, the old that I was looking at, those particular images or that particular style of thing that I was looking at, it's not as exciting as it used to be. I need some more excitement. Basically what I'm saying is I need more adrenaline released into my life, into my body, and so I'll go looking for something just perhaps a bit more risque. Perhaps initially just looking at semi-clothed people, and that was bringing an excitement. But after a few months, that's just not quite what it is that I want to. It's same old, it's getting boring. So maybe a little less clothing, perhaps a lot less clothing, or starting to look at activities, sexual activities and so forth that people do, which become more and more risque, more and more demeaning, more and more perverted. And there's just a slow what I call boundary creep, whereby just breaking into new areas in order to get more excitement. This is how the compulsion works. And so that we come round to debauchery and addiction, where it is that people are just addicted to internet pornography. And one of the sad things is that when they become addicted, they lose the beauty of true intimacy. And so often then when they're having sex, if it's within a marriage, they can be, well, the excitement's not there, the adrenaline's not there to start off with, because to make love with my wife is a perfectly legitimate and natural and beautiful thing to do. So I'm not doing anything wrong, and I'm not doing anything that is risque, so the adrenaline's not there. In fact, the chemicals that are produced in pure love, in sexual love as God has designed, come through the pituitary gland. And that's where pure love is experienced. But false intimacy inevitably involves adrenaline. And where we've associated sex now with adrenaline, we come in pure intimacy to say, well, this is boring. I need the excitement. I need the release. I need the, rather than the beauty of that union and consummation and just the deep satisfaction of pure marital love, which is far more glorious than the adrenaline thing. But the lie is, I need the adrenaline. I need the adrenaline. And so, pornography itself actually undermines marital love. And one of the sad things is that often people who become addicted or have compulsions with internet pornography feel they're going to actually drag that into the marital relationship. So, I'll just finish this other one that I started here initially. Just what may happen. Again, there's a trigger. We have come to the point where we're beginning to rely on pornography just to get through life. Find that life is pretty boring unless I get that release of adrenaline, unless that particular neural pathway in my brain and my body is actually being exercised. And so there's the depression from within, or the pain from within. There's an image or something that triggers from the outside, and there's this sense of, wow, I want to go and sort of look at some more pornography. And so there's that planning, mental preoccupation. When can I do that? Like when will it be safe at home? When will the wife be out and the kids be in bed, or the kids be out and I'll be home by myself? When can I, when's the planning, just working out, or even working out, well, if I can't do it at home, where can I do it? Where can I go to an internet cafe? Can I go here? Can I go there? Just the mental preoccupation. And then the ritual. If it's being done at home, and just a sense of, well, I just make sure that honey's in bed. Like, honey, I've just got to stay up tonight. I've got work on the stock market I've got to do, or I've got work from the office I've got to finish, or I'm going to go fishing at the weekend. I want to check the tides and want to check the weather and want to check this. You go to bed and I'll be in later. And this is all part of the ritual. It actually involves deceit, of course, so it's not just sexual sin, as sin sort of blossoming is the wrong word, but you know what I mean, just dividing into many different areas. And so just sort of wait for a while and then sort of go for a walk through the house just to make sure that, yeah, the kids are asleep, and in the bedroom, yes, Honey's asleep. I'll just maybe get a Coke or a glass of red or something and just go back and just quietly close the study door and sit down. And I'm going to check the tides. I'm going to do that. That's what I'm going to do. It's kind of sort of just self-talk that is kind of in denial, but meantime the adrenaline is building up. Go online and check the tides first of all, and just quickly open the door. Yes, everything's quiet out there, and then sort of just type in the sites and look for surf for pornography. That's the ritual phase of the addiction, or the compulsion. And so there's acting out, the person acts out, and then what we have, the consequences. Initially the consequences are guilt and shame, and so they go into the heart. So not only might there be loneliness and lust and pain from things that happened in the past or whatever, and longing and curiosity in the heart, but now there's also guilt and shame in the heart. Perhaps even self-hatred. I hate myself for doing this, but on the other hand, I can't help myself. I can't stop myself from doing it. I'm weak. This sense in the heart, and all that does is actually compact the heart's need to escape some more. And so inevitably it's not going to be too long feeling that weight in the heart, that sin in the heart, that the next trigger comes along and back into the mental preoccupation. When can I do this? What night's going to be safe? When, whatever, what excuses can I use? All of the mental preoccupation and the planning that comes again to the ritual, comes again to the acting out, that compacts the shame and guilt, and around we go, and around we go, and around we go. And it becomes just a very compulsive and addictive thing. What do you think might be some of the consequences of internet pornography, what might be some of the consequences?
Maybe sexual offending against third parties, maybe.
Sorry, a sexual
offending against other people,
yes,
other genders.
Yes, well, certainly. Taking advantage of other people. I mean, even the porn actors, I mean, we need really to have compassion for them, not to be taking advantage of them. But of course, the other thing that happens in boundary creep is pushing younger and younger, so that a lot of people who have child pornography on their computer didn't set out to have child pornography or underage pornography on their computer. So often what's happened is they've thought, just go for the younger, like for the stronger, the more beautiful. Early 20s, there's kind of an association in that, because hey, that was the time before all the problems of life set in. That was the time before I had a mortgage, and that was the time before I had too much responsibility in my job. And that was the time before I had a few failures under my belt in terms of things that had happened. Those wonderful years, those early 20s, and there's kind of, because people are escaping, they will go to look to the age of where things were good, things were better. And so often I'll go back to younger and sort of looking at people in the young 20s and say, as I said, same old gets just a little boring. So just a bit younger, maybe look for some 18-year-olds. And before you know it, they've gone younger than they oh, I'm sure she was only 14. Oh, switch it off. Quickly close it down. I just looked at something that was, I promised myself I would never look at such a thing. But then, a few weeks later, that was interesting. And then there's this thought, well, I've actually already seen it. Like, I've done it. I'll just go back and look again, just for, and so people can go back and look at the younger. Breaking boundaries. See, pornography inevitably is going to be a constant breaking of boundaries, which makes the sites more and more perverted, more and more degraded, more and more debauchery, because of the need for something more exciting. So yes, taking advantage of other people. One of the other things is that we tend to therefore objectify people and in internet pornography, because you're just looking at bodies and you're not interacting with real people. Well, you're seeing real people, but there's not an interaction there. But you're actually coming to that point of intimacy. I mean, the Lord has designed nakedness to be that special gift between husband and wife, and so there's intimacy there. But when you're just looking at it constantly, 1,000 different bodies, being looking past as you surf the net, intimacy is just drained of its glory, and you become attached to false intimacy. You're getting this sort of seeing, what is meant for marriage, just put out there like it's on the supermarket shelf, and like it's, I suppose, really comparing what a high-class meal at a French restaurant with perhaps eating from a rubbish tip is perhaps an analogy that we can draw. But that's what's done to intimacy. It undermines intimacy, and so consequently people actually lose the capacity for true intimacy, because it's been cheapened and shortcuts have been taken, and just don't really know how to connect at a deeper and truer level. So that's another consequence of pornography. Anybody think of any others?
Is I guess the weight of guilt and shame, would that lead to depression?
Yes, depression, indeed, because
you're talking about a spiral down, really.
Talking about a spiral down, and it's a sinful spiral, and of course, yes, because of the fact that, see, the glory of our sexuality, we know that somehow we're cheating ourselves of the truth, and even if it's not a conscious thought up there, it's something, in terms of being made in the image of God and knowing therefore inherently what the truth is. We just know that we've missed the mark, which of course is the meaning of the word sin. And we may not, people outside the world may not call it sin, but they somehow recognise they've missed the mark. And that indeed can bring a weight of depression. Yeah.
I think all of our feelings get degraded by the unreality of everything that we're looking at. So, for example, it's not just with matters of sex, but it's also with matters of violence.
Yes.
You mentioned
Violence.
about going towards younger people, but there's also people get addicted to violent sex, which is something that in their own relationships they'd find abhorrent.
That's right. Well, find abhorrent initially, but
Yes.
unfortunately then sort of seek to
That's
actually
right.
introduce that into
right.
their own relationships. And the point for those who may not have heard is violence becomes a problem. You know, one of the boundary creep and this very subtle and invasive problem of the internet. What was pornography back in the 50s and 60s became mainstream TV in the 70s and 80s. What was pornography in the 70s and 80s became mainstream TV in the 90s and noughties. That's perhaps an appropriate terminology for those years. And so the pornography industry, in order to keep making money, have got to push boundaries. And so what's happening in the last 10 years in particular is the association of sex and violence, because that gets the adrenaline going. And so violence is being interwoven into sexuality and into pornography, and so you get sadism and masochism and bondage and those kind of things. And see, the problem for society is, what does that say about what's going to be normal in 10 years' time, in terms of what's on TV and how it is that people are living their lives. So all the time that this beautiful gift of sexuality that God has given is just being devoured. I really believe that we are living in end times. I mean, we've been living in end times now for 2,000 years, but I think that those 2,000, there's a climax coming from the point of view that Satan has unleashed this flood of filth onto society in an unprecedented way, and what it is really doing is striking at the image of God in humanity, because our sexuality in a powerful way reflects who God is. God is love, God is creativity, God is a God of covenant, God is a God of great joy and pleasure. I mean, these are just the initial characteristics of God that we can think of, and we recognise that love, that creativity, covenant, joy and pleasure are all inherent within sexuality. And so our sexuality is really a prime revelation of the image of God. And so as Satan is attacking that in society, in the way that he is at present, he is having one last big go at attacking the glory and the sovereignty of God, the very personhood of God. And so we are actually seeing this, which is one of the reasons why it is that we as Christians need to be guarding our own hearts from this stuff, but also reaching out with good news about the way that people can be set free, and, because the gospel is powerful to set free. Just as we finish this session, I guess the other thing is that apart from pornography is also the chat room, an interactive sites that are available on the internet as well. And whereas men tend more towards pornography, because men are more visually oriented, women who are more relationally oriented tend more to the chat rooms and filling up their loneliness, seeking to meet their loneliness by going to chat rooms and talking with people. And of course, in chat rooms, we don't know who we're talking to because there are people have out there personas. In fact, a lot of people, one of the big things is to create personas on the internet. And the more that you can create personas and draw people in, the more fun it is. Again, the adrenaline. But women sort of can go on there just in order to find somebody to talk to relieve their loneliness. And that so often turns to dirty talk, and from there to liaisons and so forth. In fact, interestingly enough, certain set of statistics that I've seen shows that that women tend to act out one-on-one more than men in terms of liaisons on the internet, which is perhaps not possible because you think it's got to be the same number. See, but actually there is a higher degree of women who actually arrange to have liaisons with people that they've met on the internet. And again, I've ministered to many Christian women who didn't set out to do that. In their loneliness, they set out to just find somebody to talk to find a soulmate that they could talk to. But the soulmate sort of drew them in, and so often, let's meet for coffee somewhere. And that leads to one thing to another to another. So that's another aspect of internet sexual brokenness, I suppose, sexual addiction. Are there any questions arising from what it is that I've shared so far? I certainly will repeat those for the sake of the video.
Would you call, people talk a lot about sex addiction these days, like as a medical sort of condition, or even using it in defence sometimes, like from a legal point of view. Do you think it's a medical condition, or sometimes, or...?
The question is sex addiction a medical condition, or are you saying is it a legitimate addiction?
Well, I don't know exactly what I'm saying, to be honest. And I don't really know if people who bandy that term around really know what it is either.
Well,
people sort of say, I couldn't help it, I'm addicted.
Yeah, I bandy that term around because sex addiction is a real problem. And sex addiction basically can be defined as a way in which people medicate or escape from the pressures of life through, basically through orgasm and whatever means that they need to achieve that. And that precludes outside a loving relationship, of course. And that sex addiction can either be a continual thing or in a binge of activities. So sex addiction is very similar to alcoholism, drug addiction, etc. Alcoholism, there can be the alcoholics who are the wardrobe drinkers who can't get by a day, can't get through a day without having, a flask in the bedside table when they wake up for a swig, and then in the in the glove boxes of the car as they drive to work or to the station, and then in the wardrobe, in the cupboard at work or in the desk or whatever, and just through the day, just keeping themselves topped up, or else daily at the pub because they need that alcohol. There's that form of just constant, or alternatively binging, where they can go for months, years sometimes without a drink, and then something happens, trigger, bang, and they'll binge for weeks. Sex addiction is a similar thing. from the point of view that the chemical actually are those chemicals that I talked about. First of all, adrenaline, but also the endorphins that are released in the brain, again with orgasm. And that the endorphins are the thing that sort of bring that sense of, just that sense of peace, and everything is wonderful. That lasts for that long until the guilt and the shame come back in and the heart is further compacted. And so the sex addict actually carries in his or her body the chemicals that they are relying on in order to just get through life. Sex addiction, I believe, is the most pervasive addiction in society, but the one that is not recognised for two reasons. The powers that be often are as much involved as anybody else, and there's denial. But also, the big end of town's got so much money invested in it.
All right, well, thanks very much, Ron. We're going to break for supper. We'll have about a 15-minute supper break, and then we'll come back. We've been dealing with the problem. I think next talk we're dealing with the solution.
Yes.
Great.